The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 135 of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, and right by my side today, our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan.
Chris, it's great to be with you, COVID-free and relaxed, recharged, refreshed, and ready for action in 22. And of course, you, me, and Paul have been spending the last few days just kind of refocusing our own strategy for WealthBuilders. But sometimes, it's really important to revisit some of those things that we've done before. And I think given what's been going on, not just pandemic-wise, but with the massive hike in energy prices, inflation, we're seeing tax rates going up, both personally and professionally in business, obviously to pay for the pandemic, which I don't begrudge for a second. However, there's never been a better time to revisit one of our old favourites. And I think we need to do that today, Chris.
That's right. We're looking at a process that we call debits, and it's a core step inside the recurring revenue roadmap. It sits at step number 2, part of the foundation. And we covered this in previous episodes, but way back in episode 4. 4? In 2019.
Blumeneck.
So we went into some detail. So definitely...
Did I have hair then or not?
I don't think so.
Not that far back then.
So we will point you back and link to that episode in today's show notes, because we covered off debits in detail there. But we want to kind of freshen it up, revisit, and make a little tweak today as well.
Well, you have to refresh things because the world's changed. Now, just think about it. Imagine you've got a beautiful building and you own a gorgeous... We're in the farm today, right? So we've got a gorgeous farm here. We've got a gorgeous building and we're seeing the beams. We're enjoying life now. But if you imagine we left that for 2 years and there was a leak and the water was spilling out, but we thought, it's only a drip, it's not going to matter. What would happen over time, Chris, is that building would gradually get worse and worse and worse. And eventually that building would dilapidate and not only lose the power to create income, but it would also lose its value and become, instead of an asset, to become a liability. Now, if you had a building like that, you wouldn't dream of letting that leak continue, would you?
No way.
Nobody would do it if they could see it. But the problem that I see with people is the lack of transparency, because their lives are busy. We're all busy. The vortex of life that holds us in an eddy of what we do every day, who we see and who we meet and how we work, that keeps us going round and round in a circle and makes us a bit dizzy. And that dizziness means we don't see what's going on in our finances. So we just encourage from time to time, ideally once a year, ideally randomly. So it's got nothing to do with the tax year. It's got nothing to do with January, albeit we're talking now in January 22. But given, as I said, the big changes that I've seen, I think it's never been more important to revisit it. And here's why. The other thing I want to mention, because one of the things we'll cover is, as you know, is tax. But the Adam Smith Institute, which I did refer to way back on the original podcast we did, the Adam Smith is an economist, a more famous economist than I am, Chris, but he's dead. I'm still around. And they publish something called Tax Freedom Day. And Tax Freedom Day is a kind of a highly calculated, what's the average length of time during the course of a year, beginning on the 1st of January to the end of December. How long does it take us before the money we're earning in our jobs or our businesses, how long before we stop paying tax? In other words, at what point in the year are we working for ourselves? Mm-hmm. This year, or 2021, 31st of May.
Shocking.
We're working till the 31st of May. On average, some people working longer, of course, and usually employees, they're paying more tax because there are tax breaks in business that you don't get them as employees. We'll maybe touch on that. And that's the longest it's ever been in history. If you think about that, that's 5/12 of the year, 44%, 41%, right, of all of our income is going in taxes, generally. And that's huge, which means it's really important that in the context of that being the highest it's ever been, and it's not going to get any easier, anything's going up, the tax take is going up, we've got to be paying attention to our debits. So maybe you could set the scene for what that process is.
Well, let's just cover off what we mean by debits, because it is an acronym. We love an acronym at WealthBuilders.
We do.
And as I say, covered it in detail in episode 4. But D stands for debt.
Yeah.
E stands for education. B stands for bills. I is for insurance. T for taxes.
Yeah.
And we're going to save the S for last.
Yeah, I think we're going to make a little tweak this year because I've been a bit horrified at what I've seen. And we had a really, really great review this year where we made a fantastic saving for someone. And that saving was so big, it was a catalyst for me to say, I think I should change debits. I think I should make the change. So why don't we go through each of those? Now, of course, we did a bit of a run through way back when, but
some things will change.
And it doesn't hurt to repeat things that was, repetition is the mother of all of this knowledge and this wisdom. Yeah. So we need to do that. Yeah. Debt's a big one because, people use debt in all sorts of aspects of their lives, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. And that's really not the scope of today's webinar or today's podcast, rather. So we're talking about debt generally. Most people have got some kind of debt, which they're either paying their life, right? So they're paying for consumer debt like credit cards and so forth, or they've got debts on, let's say, their home. Because for most people, they're not using their home as an asset. So we're not talking about mortgage debt for buy-to-let or for investment property, not in this particular discussion, just talking about debt that we have in our life. And debt is a really, really big expense. And the important thing to recognize is whenever you buy anything with debt, it costs you more, right? Because you've got to add the cost of the debt on. But one of the other important things I didn't say way back when, Chris, is that the cost of anything that's ignored, the cost of anything that you can reduce or eliminate is not just the saving, but it's the compounding effect of what you can do with the money that you can't do if you spent it. So if you can save some money on debt, then it allows you the opportunity to plant the seed of what you save and make those seeds turn into things that you can grow, you can turn into recurring income. And for many people who start their life, many people perhaps who are new to WealthBuilders, Chris, they might be just getting that feeling that, maybe you guys are right. We need to stop trading time for money, stop working for one source of income, be it in a job or be it in a business. We need to be building wealth. But where's the money? Where am I going to start? And the place to start, generally speaking, even if you don't connect with WealthBuilders, is in your debits. And debt is one of the biggest ones because whether it's student debt, whether it's debt from mortgage, whether it's debt from consumers. And in my book, which I wrote in 2004, actually, Chris, Save a Fortune, How to Completely Eliminate Your Mortgage, Loan to Credit Cards Fast. Definitely worth having a copy of that. And we're going to give you a copy for free. And we'd like you to download it. And there are some lessons in there. There are 12 lessons in there that you could use. And some of those lessons are still relevant today. Some of them definitely been updated. And some fun ones that we could touch on later, particularly as the world is kind of changing in terms of what you can sell these days, like decluttering, selling stuff that's old. I mean, we'll get to that.
Yeah. So Save a Fortune Fast. If you'd like a copy of that, Kevin's book, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/Save a Fortune Fast, all together. We'll link to that in the show notes as well, so you can just click on that link and then just download a copy. We also did a couple of podcast episodes where we went through each of those secrets.
Oh, did we? Remember. Right, okay.
So I'll link to those as well. Let me just ask you a question around debt, Kevin, because it's something sometimes people ask is, should I put all my money to pay off debt or should I use my money to build assets? Is there a view on that? Yeah,
there is a view on that. And the view on that is really all depends on the cost of the debt. So if you've got, one of the things that definitely has changed over time is you see that people having adverts on the TV, right? And it says, here's an easy way to consolidate your loans, only 99% APR. Okay, so they all have to publish their interest rates now. And everyone's focused on what's the cost per month, not what's the cost on the money. Now, if you're spending 99% APR, that's a huge sum of money. You couldn't possibly make that as a return. So if you've got high cost debt, focus on elimination. If you've got low cost debt, 3, 4, 5, 6%, you could probably make more money once you understand the asset building strategies and techniques. You could probably make more money than the cost of the debt. However, sometimes we don't just do things for financial reasons. I've mentioned this before. Sometimes people want to feel that the weight of debt has been removed from their life. They want to feel debt-free. They want to feel mortgage-free. That was a feeling that I had. It was definitely a feeling I needed for my wife, if you remember. Mm-hmm. That's why we don't have a mortgage on our home, and we never will, because it's important to my wife to feel like the roof over our house, over our head, is completely safe. So if Kev croaks, she's okay. She doesn't have to worry about the complexity. And of course, I'm being slightly, slightly tongue-in-cheek about that, but, we're not talking about the roof as in the physical roof, or the roof as in how to protect things, which is another part of the wealth building foundation that we teach, how to make sure you're protecting your family, create, build and protect your wealth. And that probably would be the source of another reminder podcast, I think, Chris, in the coming weeks.
Okay, so I think we've covered D there for debt. So definitely a way to find some savings.
And get a good mortgage broker. If you've got mortgage debt, get a good mortgage broker you trust, you can connect with, and they can shop around for you and get you the lowest possible cost and review that all the time for you. So every 1 year, every 2 years, or if you've got fixed rates at the end of the fixed rate. So it's something that's happening proactively to manage the cost of your debt down. So if you're making some profit, pay some of it down so you've got slightly less debt next time. And always look at if you've got buy-to-let, investment properties, look at what's known as your debt-to-equity ratio. So what's the value of the properties you own compared to the value of the debt? And stress test it. And what I mean by stress test is the mortgage rates right now will be low, but they're not going to stay low. At some point, they're going to go up. So every 1%, if interest rates go up from 3 to 4, then 4 to 5 and 5 to 6, what will that do to your cash flow? So it's important to be aware of, what happens if? And the safest way to not to have that problem is gradually move your debt from 75% to 74% to 70% to 65% and so on. And ideally, you want to get that down to 50% to be really safe, or lower than that if you're like me, you want to have the lowest amount of debt in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So on to E then. E is for education. Mm-hmm. So before we start looking at how you can perhaps reduce those costs, what do we mean by education here? What kind of education might this include? Yeah.
So look, we know education is at the very essence, it's the starting point of the wheel of wealth that we refer to, which is that circle of excellence that says, how does wealth build? And it always starts with education. But look, we have to be lifelong learners as wealth builders. And we know for some people, they've still got the cost of the education, the student debt, around them. So we've got to think about that as a cost. We're not talking about that. We'll deal with that in the D for debt. But if you're going to build wealth, you need to grow your education. And how you do that is you're going to be investing some of your money to build knowledge. How do you keep the cost of that down? Well, one of those is to deal with trusted people. Because just as I talked about interest rates being very high, shark-infested waters there are many sources of education in all assets you could build, from cryptocurrency to property to trading options to stock market, you name it. There'll be some kind of education that you can get. Nothing wrong with Googling that, just to get a feeling for where education is out there. But be absolutely mindful that you would want to work with trusted people who have the education, but that the education is followed very quickly by the application of the education. Yeah. Because education that's not used is just money spent. Education applied leads to cash flow, and wealth comes from cash flow. Sounds like you wanted to jump in.
Well, I think, we speak to a lot of people, unfortunately, who've been overwhelmed. There's so much possibilities out there, and we've heard the terms, haven't we? Shelf development and course junkies.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people do get into that kind of, circle of just one course to the next, but never actually applying it, as you say.
Yeah, so. I mean, there is of course, we need to be mindful of our own wealth dynamic and how we are. And yes, we see people who looking for the perfect answer, and there is no perfection. It's you just get started, and then you'll learn to get better later. You always get better, you never get perfect. So it's about getting enough education that will lead you to getting the right kind of connection to people who are using the education. You apply a bit of due diligence, and then that should lead you to action. And that's the way we teach it. But it's just as important to recognize that educators have got a business. And like any business, there's a win-win. And the win for them is they want to sell more education. Of course they do. We recognize that. But we want to get the education, but at the lowest possible price. And just as you can ethically negotiate, you can negotiate terms with educators. You don't have to take the off-the-shelf price. This is life. So you can negotiate. What you could do there is, number one, you could use WealthBuilders trusted partners. What we're looking to do there is serve our members, negotiate the lowest possible prices with the best possible people that we trust, that we resonate with, that we know is good education backed by decent support. That's one way to do it. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want to connect with WealthBuilders, that's fine. But if you want to then work with somebody else, see if they do a 2-for-1. You could go with a friend, because usually they don't mind if you've got two people there, and maybe it's a way to build on somebody else's wealth dynamic. Maybe it's a way to find a joint venture partner, or maybe it's just a way to reduce the cost of that. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can use to make the cost of education either lower, or in some cases you can get it completely for free. For example, we've got a relationship with one of the big educators where they will refund the cost of being in the WealthBuilders program if you buy, their flagship program, which many hundreds of people do a year. There's nothing wrong with that, but because they respect us so much and they know how committed we are to helping people build their wealth and making sure they do follow through, not just buy the education, they will refund the cost of being in our program. So there's so many different ways people can do it. And if you're curious about that, before you commit to buying education, give us a call and we'll help you understand, are they trusted people? Is there a way that we know that can help you reduce your cost? There is no published scale of these things. So there's always room for negotiation, because once they've written the educational program, it's there. They don't actually cost that much to make it available to you. So let's just say negotiation is an art. And as long as you understand that art, we can help you become more of a negotiation artist in what we do.
Okay. So B is for bills. So we all have bills. Probably a really good place, actually, we should mention for all the debits processes is Money Saving Expert, because it's a great resource, right?
It's a great resource. Look, I've got to say, Martin Lewis does a great job and he's got a great website. And of course he makes affiliate income, but hey, he's doing all the work, all that hard work. I mean, I was looking at something he was doing the other day, talking about how the gas prices are going up and how some of the gas companies are saying you can't move to a standard variable tariff, you've got to do certain things, and you don't. So by understanding your rights, and if anybody changes the terms of your contract, like your phone contract, once they change the terms of the contract, you've got 30 days to decide whether you want it or not. So there's so many different things you can use to help you say, no, I don't want that. Or no, this is my right. I don't want to pay that. I want to pay this. But the starting point is always transparency. So it means you've got to do some work. And guess what? Most people don't do the work. They're not willing to get their bank account out. They're not willing to get their online statement or their paper statement and highlight it and say, what am I paying? Is there a way I could save a bit more money? We're not saying, and let's be clear, we are not saying save your way to wealth. You can't do that. You cannot shrink your way. to be a wealthy person. You have to expand your way. But the way to start that process is shrink some things that don't deserve to be there, or can be negotiated, or can be corrected. And there's so many different ways to do that now using technology that you can save some money. Then when you make the saving, put the money to work, plant that seed that allows you to, to grow your wealth, and get your kids involved. Kids are brilliant with technology, and there's so many things the kids can do. You can get them to research things, you can get them to check things, you can get them to suggest things. It's just a way to give a teaching moment, a moment of education for your own kids, to give them a challenge to try and find a way to do what Martin does so well, but to physically do it in your case.
And we'll be including some of those things in the Wealth Builders for Families program when we launch that as well.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that, because kids are just brilliant at what they do. And I think bringing money into the home, talking about that, being a great role model. By the way, Chris, I just got to give you a little bit of news here. We've just created a quiz, right? And the quiz says, how good a money role model are you for your children?
Okay.
Yeah? Just to put in the finishing touches to that now. Okay. Can I ask you, can you tell or ask the listeners if they would like to participate in the quiz, to send a note, however you want to get them to send a note to you, whatever URL you want to create, so that as soon as I've signed it off, I could send it to them, which will give them a real insight into how good they are about bringing money into the home. And that's fine. We're not judging because we don't get the result. It's for you. But what we will be bringing is case studies and ideas from other parents, enlightened parents, just like me and like other people who've got children, and how you can do that to bring children, not just into talk about your debits, but how you can bring them into the money subject. Because after all, we're going to have the biggest wealth transfer in history in the future, and we need to equip our kids. And they ain't teaching this at school, so we need to take that responsibility seriously. Anyway, we're segueing.
Well, I'll just give the URL, because we always know we get a lot of interest every time we mention the programme. So wealthbuilders.co.uk/families, FAMILIES, and just pop your name and email. That will get you onto our list for all the upcoming news when we're launching that quiz.
All right. Final one. Watch out for that one. If you've got in credit, because sometimes the utility companies will charge you based on an estimate, and you can be in credit.
Yep.
And if you're in credit with a supplier and the supplier goes bust, you've lost your credit. So do check that you're not in credit. And if you're in credit, get the money in your bank account, not on their bank account.
Yeah. Good.
Now, I couldn't have said that 3 years ago or whenever we did the last podcast, because who would have thought? Gas companies could go bust. You never thought that. Just like in 2008, we didn't think banks could go bust. That's why you've got to revisit these things.
Yeah. Maybe now's a good time just to take a quick pause, Kevin. And like we enjoy doing, is always pulling out a review from Trustpilot. We've had quite a number, actually, over the start of the new year. But I had a great call just before Christmas with a gentleman named Terry Lewis. And Terry kindly has put a review, which I'd like to read out. So Terry says, I was introduced to Wealth Builders through a property mentor. I cannot praise the quality of the podcast enough. It's simply superb. What I love the most are Kevin and Christian's integrity, transparency, and honesty. They have a genuine desire to help people like me achieve financial goals, and for that, I cannot thank them enough. I also love Kevin and Christian's ability to take a complex subject and to break it down into easily digestible chunks. Please don't stop what you're doing. The industry needs people like you.
Oh, isn't that nice?
That's a lovely review, Terry. Thank you so much.
It is a good review, and it's we like the endorsement. It's not about blowing smoke up our rear ends. It's about saying, hey, you're doing the right things. You're helping us with the right information. You're giving us the right ideas. You're not making it too complicated. You're breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, which means people can do it. And for most people, if they just take these small steps, and they're only baby steps, aren't they, really? Do your debits. And then you just make a little bit of progress. That's the key. Yeah. It's like, one of the things that I do, it's a bit of a funny thing, Chris, but it's odd. It's completely related, but you'll see what I mean. I put my trainers on, right? I have to put my trainers on every day, even if I'm just going to go for a walk with a dog. But by putting them on, I've got to do something. I'm not allowed not to. Whereas I might not feel like doing a 30-minute run on the, in the home gym, but
the first step.
But it's doing something. So I just put them on, and then I know I'm going to do something. Just the act of putting them on, it says I'm taking a step.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I'm the fittest guy in the world, but I am making a commitment to doing something every single day. So
that's, the importance, obviously, of our members who join the Academy. We're talking about just one small element of the 9-step roadmap today, which is debits. But, all of these things compounded, with someone there to hold your hand, keep you accountable, others on that same journey, that's what makes the difference.
And the thing I said at the beginning, Chris, is the transparency. You don't see what that step does. You don't see what the baby step does. You don't see I won't get round to my debits because I won't save much. Most people save about £1,000. Some people save a lot. We'll get onto that big one in a minute, but some people save an awful lot of money. And when you can save £1,000 though, or $1,000, crumbs, And if you can do that regularly, and your kids can do a little bit more, and then you can learn how to create some income on the side, and that's another podcast we did. Do you want to signpost that one as well somewhere?
It will be in the show notes. I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
So that's how to create extra income on the side. And if you remember that one, that's another acronym, Chris, but I won't go into that one today because we want to stick to debits today.
Yeah. Right. So we've covered D for debt, E for education, B for bills. I now.
Insurance. Now, look, I'm not talking about saying, hey, you've got to go get insurance. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is, when you start to build your wealth, you're not wealthy yet. Most people will start from a place of financial insecurity. And they want to get to security, they don't want to get to independence. And generally speaking, when I'm talking to people myself, Chris, I'm saying, look, what position do you want to be in? You're financially insecure now. You're relying on one stream of income. You'd like to be financially independent, whatever that figure is for you. If something happened to you, if you were to die or to get seriously ill, so that one income stream would not even come, would you like to be financially independent, come what may? Would you like your family to be financially independent, come what may? So they're not stressing. You're not stressing. They're not stressing over tragedy. Their financial situation is resolved for the rest of their life. Now that's big insurance, and that's normally life insurance. I'm not saying get life insurance. I'm saying review what life insurance you've got. And your life insurance is going to come in 3 ways. Have a look. Which of the 3 do you have? Hopefully all 3. Number 1, have you got a life insurance policy through your job? Work out what it is. Number 2, do you have any private life cover that covers your mortgage, let's say? Number 3, have you got a pension fund? Because a pension fund is a life cover policy as well. So when you add those things up, you can get a sense of, well, okay, something happened to me. What would that value be that would go back to my family? Once you know that, you can talk to somebody you trust or talk to us again if you want to, and we'll help you understand, well, what's the gap between what that cover will provide, just like what's the gap between your current assets and the assets that you want, and how do you plug that gap if you want to? At least if you quantify it, and let's say if the gap is going to cost you £30 a month to cover the gap, and you've just found £1,000 in debits, you can guarantee financial independence for your family. And by the time 3 years has come, you kind of already so far on the journey, because for most people it takes 5 years. So you see what I mean? It's a sense of perspective. It's just a way of looking at things. And wealth builders look at things differently. They look for the creative solutions. They don't look for what's traditional. Now, that's one way to do it. Another way you could look at that, I won't go into detail of it. I'm sure we've covered this in the podcast. If, as most people do in wealth building life, they get a business, they create a business because they're entrepreneurs. If not, at the beginning, they become entrepreneurs and they create businesses. And if you've got a business, then you can get life insurance with tax relief, where the company pays the premium and the tax man gives you a tax break. You don't get that if it's private life cover. So you're saving even more money. So if you're serious about protecting your family, you could do that. We can help you. We've got a whole team of people who do that. If you don't want to do it yourself or it's too complicated, just reach out in whichever way you would normally reach out. But the other thing to do is make sure if you do have a life insurance policy, it's in trust. Now, that sounds complicated, right? Because nobody kind of understands the word trust. But what it means, you're probably too young for this, Chris, but when I was a youngster, I used to get annuals. Do you know what I mean? Like a comic book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like the Beano
or Dandy.
Or the Dandy, right, when I was young, or the whatever it was, football annuals, because I was a football kid. And one of the things you got inside a book, you turned over the first page, and in the first page was always, this book belongs to, and you'd write your name in. This book belongs to Kevin Whelan. A trust is just that. You say, this policy belongs to my beneficiaries, right? So my beneficiaries would be my wife and children. That's it. Once you've done that and you've signed that, so it's just a bit of sticky label, properly done, but it's all done for free. It doesn't cost anything to do this because all the insurance companies have got these documents and all you do is sign them. What that means is the life insurance policy that unfortunately pays somebody else because you ain't around doesn't have to go through the process of probate, doesn't have to be read via a will, doesn't have to be delayed by anything. And if you've got a complex set of circumstances, or as you're building your wealth, your situation does get more complex, that's inevitable because you're building assets, then that leads to complexity, which means probate takes longer. Now, let's say the probate, in the case of a wealth builder who died, took 2 years. That means a family maybe don't have the money they need at the worst time in their life. By filling out that form, straightforward trust form, this policy belongs to, and sign it, it does not pass go. It pays the money straight to the family, right? Really, really important lesson. I know it's not saving money. Well, it is because you don't need to pay for probate, but what you're doing is saving time, saving stress, saving heartache. And that's what you want to do. Anybody doesn't know how to do that, again, we can help. If you've got an advisor you trust, just give them a call and say, hey, Fred, it's my life insurance in trust. And if it isn't, you want an elbow in the ribs and say, well, why the hell didn't you put it in trust? Because you arranged it. But anyway, as long as you get it in trust, costs zero to do.
Yeah. And then, of course, with insurance, we've got all the kind of consumer goods, which
makes my blood boil, that one. How many times have people been sold insurance? And I think I do remember, actually, now it comes back to me, and the last time we did debits is we talked about how many people are insuring something like an iPhone, when for 10 quid a month, they could have 100 grand worth of life cover for their family, which is more important. So for me, insurance is about putting people in a place of the safest place they can be should the worst happen. It's not about replacing your iPhone. It's not replacing your washing machine. It's not replacing your tumble dryer. It's replacing things that are critical and relevant in your life. If you've got those things, I would challenge them. And if you can and you agree with me, you don't have to, replace that insurance with something that's more precious, or just save the money, paid off your debt. Yeah. Whatever. Or build your wealth, whatever.
If you want to keep those insurances, at
that's
least
fine,
just
but be aware of it.
And make sure you're reviewing them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we're nearly there. So T is for tax. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Yeah,
look, tax is all pervasive. So this podcast, you can't get into detail about tax, but I will say, so many things people do that are just wrong. Okay, so many things they could do that could check. Number one, they should check their tax code, because so many tax codes are wrong, which means what's happening is they're paying more money than they should be. All right. I gave a lesson to my son, Simon. Right. He's 24 now. He's a surveyor. He was looking at his first pay slip and he was kind of enjoying it. And I'm saying, well, you've got a car. It's not on there. He's like, what do you mean it's not on there? I said, it's not on there, son. So if you haven't declared, if the company car bit isn't on there, you're going to end up paying tax on something that you think you've got on your bank account when you haven't. And I said, look, I know it's going to be painful for you, but you've got to go to your company and say, hey, you've forgotten about the car. It's not showing up there. So, and he said, well, why the hell have I got this car? I said, well, then you chose it. You should have chosen a lower one. So, a little lesson in there. But checking your tax code, really important. Making use of all the allowances you can, personal allowances. Don't forget, you've got kids. Kids have personal allowances. So you can use, I don't mean use, but you can use children's allowances in so many different ways. I think we might touch on that in the podcast somewhere. I do remember sharing knowledge somewhere about that. But you can employ children in your business. You can, if you've got kids who are talented or who look great and they're models of some kind, or they're performers, they can earn money and they can earn tax-free allowances. Think about building future tax-free allowances. So we see a lot of families where the pension is built predominantly in one person's name and almost nothing in the second person's name. Well, if you imagine we're all allowed to earn a certain amount of money before we pay tax, if you don't make use of that in the future by having a balance between, say, husband and wife with their respective pensions, so make sure there's a balance so both pensions are building up so that in the future you've got two lots of tax-free allowances to claim instead of all going on one and then you're paying more tax on it. But tax is a big issue. It's definitely not something you could do in a podcast, but there's definitely so many different ways that when we get into it, particularly business owners, we can show them ways to reduce their tax and then redeploy the money they're saving in tax into other areas.
Yeah. So do your research and look into that.
And there's so many online guides that will tell you how, and books as well, that can get into your situation more specifically. And if you feel like you're paying too much tax, then just engage with someone professional who should be able to save you more money than their cost. And if they don't employ them. Okay,
so this leads us on to the S of debits, which formerly
was support. And I think I created support because step 2 in the Wheel of Wealth was it's educate first, then support. And the whole idea of supporting people is important in Wealth Builders because we believe people don't just need knowledge, they need to be guided how to use that knowledge. So I think support was in my mind when I wrote debits. But over the years, Chris, I've begun to realise there's more wasted money in this area, this new S, than anywhere else in all of the debits. In all of them.
Wow.
It's the biggest one.
Okay.
So I'm going to change it, which means, Chris, unfortunately...
We've got to update some materials.
Well, you keep saying every week, the membership director for WealthBuilders, so you better redirect it. But we're going to call the S stock market fees, right? Because the stock market fees, what people are paying to access the stock market, makes my blood boil completely because it's too much. They're paying fees everywhere. Custodian fees, advisory fees, transactional fees, hidden penalties and charges. And we've seen that with certain companies that we must remain nameless, but we see it all the time where charges are disguised, hidden, are opaque somewhere on the bottom of page 63 instead of right in front of you, and people simply accept fees as they are because that's what they told they are. So they think, well, that's what you pay.
Yeah.
It is not. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, and at 2% might not sound too big, right?
Well, yeah, which is quite right, which is typically what people are paying in the UK at least, and I think in the US as well, is about 2% to access money in the stock market. Now, bearing in mind that for most people who are building their wealth, particularly those at the start, probably have more money in the stock market than anything else. Their ISAs are in the stock market, their pension is in the stock market, but they don't know what the fees are. And even if they thought and said, well, they're only 2%, it doesn't sound enough. It doesn't sound that much at all. 2%? Doesn't sound much, especially if the stock market's rising massively, which it has been, but of course it doesn't. The stock market leverages or averages itself out over time. And in the long term, for most people in the stock market who are kind of average risk, the the gross return, so what's actually earned, is about 6%, maybe 7%, but in that ballpark, 6 or 7%. And if what most people are paying is 2%, that's a third of their money.
Mm-hmm.
That's like sticking a siphon in somebody's bank account and sucking it out without them knowing, or they're aware of it, but they don't see the siphon, so they don't feel the pain. If it was in a bank, they'd notice it. If it was somebody going in and taking the gnomes out of their garden, or digging out a bit of the lawn and saying, well, I'm taking a third of your lawn, you'd say, hang on a minute, you can't do that. But they're doing it. Now, I don't want to be facetious because this is serious, because the impact of that money, not just being taken, but compounding is the essence of wealth building. And if you remove somebody's money, that's money that can't compound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
And we had a case in point, didn't we? We had a review from one of our relatively new Wealth Builder members recently who said, based on our guidance, she'd saved £15,000 in fees in 1 year. Mm-hmm. Not just 15,000, but the compounding effect of that 15,000, and then the 15,000 year 2, and the compounding effect of that, and 15,000 year 3. That's massive, massive sums of money. And most people kind of go, oh, well, that's what people pay. They don't. Technology has driven down the cost of virtually everything except financial services. And I want people to wake up to that one. Smell the coffee and say, no, I'm not willing to accept that unless you are. If you're happy with the advice you get, if you're happy with the guidance you get, if you're happy with the funds that you've got and you're happy with the fees you're paying, that's fine by you. But for me, what I see is most people are paying too much for too little. And I would rather they challenge that and either drive that to negotiate, go back to your advisor and say, hey, what are you actually doing for this money? I think it's too high. Maybe we could agree on a lower figure. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to look at what you're invested in and kind of learn a bit more about investing. And once you learn more, you'll learn more about how technology has brought down the cost of investing, particularly through low-cost funds like ETFs, exchange-traded funds, low-cost trackers, all sorts of things that you can drive down the cost probably to less than 1. So if that's a 50% saving you can make, and in some cases, way, way less than 1, won't go into details of how you do that, but that's for those people who want to get really involved with their money. And probably people have heard of the word SSAS and how you use those kind of pensions for business owners where they take control of their money. So they are in charge. So the fees are all under their discretion now, and usually tiny, tiny, tiny percentage because, they're not using advisors or funds in the same way. Anyway, I'm not saying funds are bad. I'm not saying advisors are bad. I'm saying get aware of what you're paying. Decide whether you're paying the right amount, negotiate it down, change how you hold it, or get in touch with us and we do a free review for you and say, hey, this is what you're paying if it's too smoky for you, and we'll bring that transparency to light and say, hey, here's what you could do to save that. Now, that's something that's done through our IFA partners, which is not something Wealth Builders do. We don't give financial advice, but we do give guidance to say, hey, go talk to this person or go talk to somebody you trust to find a way to reduce those costs, because the long-term impact of that, not just for you, but for your children, is massive. So we're changing it, Chris. The S for debits, stock market fees. Right.
I think that's a worthy change. So let's recap then. We started off with D for debt, E for education costs, B for bills, I for insurance, T for tax, and then stock market fees.
That's it.
Okay.
And if you combine a bit of all of that, find a little bit here, a little bit there, and then you put that money to work, and then you do a little bit of side hustle, you make some money on the side, and then you get your children to work, and then you do a bit, you can absolutely make a massive, massive difference in your life.
And this applies to everyone, but especially for those people at the beginning.
Yeah.
Where do I start? I haven't got any money. Well, go through this process and find some.
Yeah, and the intellectual value of doing that actually gives you a boost of confidence.
Yeah.
And once you can do that, you begin to think, hang on a minute, I am creative, I am finding things. And that can lead to many other different ways, including, this is the way maybe you could, if you're really good at it and somebody else can't be bothered, it's a service. you could bring that service to them. So there's so many different ways you can use what you learn to bring. Look like Martin has done this massive business he's got now because he spotted the opportunity that there was no central place to record different things about saving. Now, the difference between what Martin Lewis does, who I applaud wholeheartedly, by the way, is he's finding you savings. What we're saying is put the savings to work. Don't just bank the savings and let it get lost in the flow of what you're doing again, in that eddy of your life, and then it doesn't do anything. Doesn't reduce your debt, it's not building your wealth, it's not creating anything. You need to take that lesson, but make that money work, plant the seed, make it grow, enjoy the fruit of that in years to come.
Yeah, you mentioned the word confidence a minute ago, and that's really stage one of our roadmap is building confidence. And what we're talking about today, debits, that's step 2 of the 9-step roadmap. And, stage 2 is building knowledge then with the 7 pillars of wealth. And stage 3 is building assets. And that's the ongoing process, turning the wheel. So, all of these things we're talking about, we're going to go into some more depth when we do the webinar in a few weeks' time. So we're going to open up and do a live webinar at the end of January, Kevin.
Okay.
And we haven't got a date yet, but we will certainly have that fixed in the next week or 2. And anyone listening wants to jump on and just kind of see us face to face. We're going to share the roadmap and bring some of our members on, see how they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So that'd be fun to do. And it's good to have a new intake. And we've got some exciting changes, not least the families and the new change in debits and many other things as well. So looking forward to sharing and looking forward to helping more people become financially independent on our big picture target of helping 50,000 people to become completely financially independent of what's going on with COVID, independent of what's going on with governments, with inflation, independent of everything. So you can create real freedom for yourself. We're passionate about it. I hope we've touched you and maybe you can get a little bit passionate about it too. If you do, come and join us. If you don't, you kind of deserve what you get, don't you?
Just keep on listening. Yeah, well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. And Kevin, we'll catch up same time, same place next week.
Yes, and until then, my friend, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the WealthBuilders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.